Howdy folks, and welcome back to the World of Warships official release replay contest. We're still looking in the destroyer category for the most damage done, and at the end of this video somebody's going to be winning one of these babies. This is, I know I keep referring to these as the Diana class premium Soviet cruiser. That's actually wrong. They're Pallada class cruisers, of which the Diana, which this is one of them. You might be looking at this and thinking, it looks an awful lot like the St. Louis from the American tech tree. And that's because it pretty much is the St. Louis from the American tech tree. Well, it's a lot like the St. Louis. Oh, who am I kidding? We all know it's the St. Louis with a Soviet flag. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. The St. Louis is a major ass kicker, and having something very, very similar to the St. Louis, but premium, is not a bad thing at all. And at the end of this video, somebody is going to be winning one of them. However, before we get there, we've still got the rest of the runners up to take a look at, and from here on in, pretty much everybody is doing over 200,000 damage in a game. Starting off here with some highlights from this match in the American Tier 9 destroyer, the USS Fletcher, driven by Cook 111. And since these are all the higher tier games, you're going to notice a couple of things that all of these games have in common. Most notably, Tirpitzers everywhere. These things are the Lerva of World of Warships. For those of you who don't play World of Tanks, the Lerva is a premium Tier 8 heavy tank in World of Warships. No, it isn't. It's a premium Tier 8 heavy tank in World of Tanks. Jingles, go home, you drunk. I'm high on cough syrup, that's what it is. Look at the rate of fire of this Fletcher, by the way. And look at the balls of steel on this guy. He knows he can't be seen. He's launched his torpedoes, he's popped a smoke screen, and he's just sitting here. Look at that. Oh, I'll tell you what, it's been an absolute nightmare recording these videos while suffering from the man flu. Every time I laugh, I break into a coughing fit and I have to re-record whatever it was. Oh, almost, not quite. And I have to re-record whatever it was I was talking about, which is making it take about twice as long as normal, because you know how much I'll laugh my ass off when I'm making these videos. And it's making it take about twice as long as normal to get the videos done. Which has been a bit of a challenge, because I'm having to do 2 videos every day in order to cover the 2 days I'm going to be away later on this week at the Chatham Historic Dockyard for the World of Warships official release UK celebration thing, as a guest of Wargaming, having a look at the new German cruisers like the Admiral Hipper and the new Soviet destroyer lines, destroyers like the Tashkent and the Yukloy. Anyway, more on that after I've gotten back from the Chatham Historic Dockyard. Meanwhile, back to the game. Now, the Fletcher, being an American destroyer, does have very good guns, although they're not as good as you might expect them to be. I should probably explain that. While he's just launched a spread of torpedoes at this very, very unfortunate Iowa-class battleship, and he's about to blow his steering gear right off, he only manages to clip him with 1 torpedo, but he does a lot of damage. Yeah, what I'm talking about when I say the guns on the American higher tier destroyers aren't quite as good as you might expect them to be, that's not so much an expression of how bad the guns are on higher tier American destroyers. They're not, they're good guns. It's more an expression of how good the guns are on the Tier 5 American destroyer, the Nicholas. Because they're the same guns that you get on the Tier 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10 American destroyers. Same caliber, they pretty much fire the same ammunition and do the same damage. They just fire faster as you go up the tiers, and in some cases you get an extra gun turret. And that's pretty much it. But they are bloody good guns. And the Fletcher is such a fast and manoeuvrable ship that, well, just look at how he's abusing this Iowa. I mean, the Iowa's attempting to return fire, but at these ranges he's never going to hit him. He's constantly turning the ship. Look down there in the bottom left corner of the screen. You can see on the compass he's constantly manoeuvring and throwing the ship around. I mean, the Iowa might get lucky and hit him, but the chances are not good. And the turrets turn so quickly on the Fletcher. He cannot throw the ship around fast enough to throw the turrets off target. They just turn so quickly. This Iowa hasn't a prayer of putting these fires out. Look at how many hits he's scoring. The Sims used to be like this. The premium Tier 7 American destroyer. It was an absolutely fantastic little gunboat, and the Iowa's dead, so yeah. Unfortunately, the Sims has been nerfed. The velocity of the shells is a lot slower than it used to be, which makes it incredibly easy for even battleships to dodge fire from the Sims in a way that you just can't from a ship like the Benson, the Fletcher, or the Gearing. Now, you may be sitting there thinking to yourself, well, what chance did that Iowa have? I mean, he couldn't hit Cook 111's ship. I mean, he may have hit him, he might have gotten lucky, but when a battleship has to start firing his main guns at a destroyer, something's gone seriously, seriously wrong. And you're absolutely right, something has gone seriously, seriously wrong. It's all the bloody Tirpitzers. There are hardly any cruisers in play here. There aren't that many destroyers in play here either. And other destroyers and cruisers are the main counter to getting the crap shot out of you. Like the, oh, watch this, here he goes. This is the sort of thing I'm talking about right here. The typical Fletcher gameplay. Watch these targets. It's almost embarrassing. His surface detection range is 7.4 kilometers. Providing he's not firing his guns. I believe firing your guns extends the range at which you'll be detected on the surface by something like 4 kilometers for a destroyer. I mean, it varies a little from ship to ship, but generally speaking, 4 kilometers. If you're in a destroyer and you're firing your guns, you can add that to the range at which you'll be detected. So he is well inside spotting range while firing his guns. Of all of these, and well, it doesn't have to be all of them. If one of them can see him, they can all see him. But none of them can see him. He's sitting inside a smoke screen, and he's abusing. Oh, yeah. And of course, it's just battleships. There are no cruisers and destroyers around here to flush him out of the smoke screen by peppering the area with high explosive cannon fire. And so these guys are just victims. And the reason is because of all the Tirpitzers. It's World of Warships has gone into open release, and so when you're in higher tier games, you don't see this in lower tier games because the Tirpitzers are tier 8 ship, and this is why I was saying earlier, they're like the Lerva of World of Warships. Noobs in high tier battleships who don't have a clue what they're doing. Of course, not all Tirpitz drivers are like that, but most of them are. And it's making it seriously unfun for high tier battleship players because they've got no cruiser escorts. They've got no destroyer escorts. They've just got a whole bunch of Tirpitzers sailing around, getting in their way, firing off their torpedoes, and just generally being useless. And the destroyers and the carriers in particular are having an absolute field day. A lot like this. Oh, here we go. Torpedoes up. And oh, we just got detected. Oh well. Smoke screen's back off cooldown. Toss some oil onto the furnaces. Generate some smoke. No longer detected. Gives it a couple of seconds. And then starts up with a 127mm guns again. And they just can't see him. 7.4 kilometer surface detection range on the Fletcher. Firing his guns, add 4 kilometers to that. All of these guys are well inside 11.4 kilometers, but because he's sitting inside the smoke screen, they can't see him. That's not fair, Jingles. If they can't see him, how can he see them? Oh, there's the high caliber. More torpedo hits. Well, he can't actually see them. Smoke screens work both ways, but have a look at the map. Over on his port beam, there are friendly ships. And these are battleships he's shooting at. You can see them from the other side of the map. So it's the ships on his team over the port that are actually spotting these targets for him. And he's just sitting there in the smoke screen, obliterating them. And look at the scores here. At several points throughout the course of this game, Cook 111's team have been just about to win. They've been like 950 points and the enemy team on 250 points. And then the enemy team sink a ship and they gain some points and they take some points away from Cook 111's team. And they basically just stave off defeat by the narrowest of margins over and over and over again. And I suspect Cook 111 is entirely happy with that because it's keeping the game going longer so he can do even more damage. Frankly, it's almost embarrassing. Now you'll note he's stopped firing because the smoke screen has dissipated. However, firing your guns adds that 4 kilometer range in a destroyer to the range at which you'll be detected for up to 20 seconds after you fire the guns. 5 seconds after he got detected, which was around about 20 seconds after he stopped firing the guns and the smoke screen had dissipated, bingo, he's not detected anymore. I think it's fairly safe to say Cook 111 has a fairly firm grasp of how the game mechanics of World of Warships work, and he's not afraid to take advantage of it. Here, check out the scores. 980 points to 256, 983, oh, somebody just died. And the scores go all the way back down to 926 again, and 299 for the enemy team. They keep staving off defeat just by the skin of their teeth. But the scores are back up again, 944. 900, oh, and they've lost another ship. Alright, it's time to start getting serious. Nailing these two Tirpitz should be enough to win it. They're both practically dead. Well, one of them is already dead. The second one's burning to death. Let's see if we can hit him with some 127mm shells and ninja the kill. And bang, that should be enough to seal the deal. 994 points. 1000, bingo. Game over. How much damage did Cook 111 do in that match? Well, with 2,300 base experience, it's going to be pretty good. Let's have a look at the details. There is one surprise there, actually. I was expecting a lot more fire damage than he actually inflicted. It turned out that the fires that you could see raging on those battleships he was spamming with 127mm high explosive had actually been set by the other ships that were shooting at them. So he didn't get as much fire damage there as I expected him to get. But, well, 156,000 torpedo damage seems about right. In combination with the high explosive shell damage and the flooding damage means he scored just over 202,000 damage during the course of that match. Not enough to win, of course, but impressive nevertheless, and so I'm entirely happy to put my hand into my own pocket and hand over 3,000 golden doubloons to Cook 111 in the USS Fletcher. Congratulations, thanks for sending that replay in. Now, on to the next runner-up. This is Livati, and he is driving the Japanese Tier 8 destroyer, the Fubuki. Now, I have no personal experience of driving the Fubuki. Tier 5 is as far as I ever got down the Japanese destroyer line, and enjoyed it a lot. The Tier 4 and Tier 5 Japanese destroyers are both fantastic. But no direct experience of sailing the Fubuki. And the Fubuki is one of those ships that you never really seem to hear people singing its praises in the forums. At the same time, you never really seem to hear people condemning it either. It just seems to be one of those ships that it's difficult to get excited about, but it isn't bad. And that really does seem to be the case. I mean, it's not particularly quick for a destroyer. Its top speed is just under 36 knots, which seems great if you're used to driving cruisers and battleships, but it's not good for a destroyer. Its guns are, well, they're not great either. The caliber of the guns isn't the issue. It's the perennial problem with Japanese destroyers, slow turret rotation speed. You don't really want to be getting into a gunfight if you're in one of these ships. The torpedoes, on the other hand, are pretty good. The stock torpedoes have a 10km range, and they're quick. The torpedo upgrade is, well, again, it's another one of those cases where you take with one hand and you give with the other. The torpedoes get extended range, 15 kilometers, but they're slower. And I've never really seen the point of having torpedoes that have a range of more than 10 kilometers, because you're never going to, well, it's not that you're never going to hit anything 15 kilometers away, but if you do, it's more down to luck than judgment. It's not just the fact that firing slow torpedoes at a target 15 kilometers away gives them all the time in the world to turn. Torpedoes spread the further they get away as well. So even if your torpedoes are on target, and even if your target hasn't changed course or speed, in the minutes that it takes your torpedoes to get there at that kind of range, well, the gap between your torpedoes is wide enough that a battleship could slip through without being hit. Now, Livati has been detected. He's now close enough to that Tirpitz that Tirpitz can see him without any problems, but the Tirpitz is having Mutsuki issues at the moment, and he's concentrating more on that Mutsuki over there, the Tier 6 destroyer, who closed into detection range first. He's now dropping a smoke screen, and because the Tirpitz turned towards the Mutsuki in order to minimise the chance that he was going to eat any of his torpedoes, that means he's providing a nice flush broadside on target for Livati's torpedoes, which is kind of nice. Teamwork gives the enemy something else to shoot at. I will say this about having torpedoes with that bit of extra range, however, 15 kilometers in this case. While I'd certainly prefer the torpedoes that are faster and have a shorter range, I mean 10 kilometers is more than enough. Even if you do miss the target that you initially aimed your shots at, having that little bit of extra range can certainly reap some dividends. In this case, that Tirpitz is not a complete fool. And the Mutsuki over there is closing in closer than he really needs to in order to fire off his torpedoes, and he's just popped into detection range of the Tirpitz. The Tirpitz, not a complete idiot, now suddenly aware that there's at least one enemy destroyer out here, starts turning the ship, which means that all of these carefully aimed torpedoes from Levati are almost certainly going to miss. Maybe one of them will hit. The Tirpitz has definitely seen these torpedoes in the water, even though he already started turning to avoid anything fired by the Mutsuki. And yep, every single one of them has missed. So yeah, thanks Mr. Mutsuki. However, if these weren't 15-kilometer range torpedoes, well, let's just say that the Tirpitz was not the only target down this arc of fire. And if these torpedoes were the stock torpedoes with the faster speed but the 10-kilometer range, they would run out of steam long before now, and two of them would not have hit an AFK aircraft carrier. Bang, bang, thank you, ma'am. And of course, because he's AFK, he's not repairing the flooding, so he's going to continue taking damage. Now, because these are the slower torpedoes, by the time they get there, he's already loaded and ready to fire again, and off they go. Let's just see how much attention that Tirpitz is actually paying. Because he hasn't detected Levati yet. He's concentrating his fire and his avoidance at the Mutsuki over there, who's just popped a smoke screen. So, there they go. You can see the Ryojo there at the back. He's just sinking, and bang, he's gone. Here comes the Tirpitz. He's seen the torpedoes. He's turning in towards them. He's doing the right thing. And is he going to... Yeah, he gets away with it. Well done to the Tirpitz. He's not a complete idiot. He immediately stops the flooding and starts using his damage repair ability to recover his health. Of course, the Tirpitz's real problem here isn't that he's got two destroyers out for his blood, and by the look of it, a battleship as well. It's the fact that he's isolated, he's alone, he's got no support, all of his cruisers are dead, and they were too far away to support him in the first place. God knows where the enemy destroyers were. They weren't over here. Well, one of them was, but he's dead. And his aircraft carrier was AFK, so he's got no fighter cover, there's no spotter aircraft up to detect all of these destroyers launching waves of torpedoes at him. And this is the thing about World of Warships, and it's one of the main problems that I think people are experiencing when they transition from the low to mid-tier gameplay, and they start getting into tier 7, 8, 9 and 10 matches. Is the meta of the gameplay changes completely. Teamwork is so much more important in high tier games. Not so much this one, it's only tier 8 after all. But when there are high tier aircraft carriers around, your only defense against them is shooting down their aircraft. And you can't do that alone because the aircraft are so much faster. They spend less time getting shot at by your battleship anti-aircraft guns, and they have more health, and so they're harder to shoot down as well. You have to coordinate your actions with cruisers and other battleships, and the fighter cover launched by cruisers and battleships and your own aircraft carriers. Running off and doing your own thing, if you're not in a destroyer, which, due to the stealthy nature of the ship, makes it practical, running off and doing your own thing in a high-tier game is suicide in World of Warships if you're in a cruiser or a battleship. And people struggle making that transition, particularly if they haven't played anything higher than tier 5 and they've just bought themselves a brand new, shiny Tirpitz tier 8 premium battleship. They used to say in World of Warships that the team with the most Colorados was going to lose, and there was certainly some truth in that because the Colorado is absolutely terrible. But currently they're saying the team with the most Tirpitzes is going to lose, and you can kind of understand why. It's not always the fault of the guys in the Tirpitzes. They haven't all just rushed out, installed the game, and without bothering to play anything else, bought themselves a Tirpitz. Sometimes they've got a couple of hundred games under their belt, and they're pretty shit hot in their tier 5 cruiser. But they have absolutely no idea what's waiting for them when they get into a higher tier game in their Tirpitz battleship. Well, shortly afterwards, one of the two remaining enemy ships behind him has been sunk, and he's leaving the remaining enemy battleship to the rest of his team. He has spotted the Mogami-class cruiser on the enemy team, the Japanese tier 8, who is currently decapping B. And the fastest way to him is straight down the middle of the map. Now, this is generally something you don't want to do on this Two Brothers map in World of Warships. Heading down this narrow gap between these two islands is usually the fastest way to send your ship straight to the bottom. However, well, he does have a lot of torpedoes, and in the narrows between these two islands, if the Megami, who has just capped, wants to get any more damage done before his inevitable defeat, I mean, look at the scores, he's never going to win. He's going to be coming down here. Now, the Megami can be a tough target when you're in a destroyer, because it can have either 155mm or 203mm guns. And if he's got the 155mm guns, he's got a lot of them, and they fire very, very quickly. The turrets do turn kind of slowly, but they're for killing destroyers. And Levati's in a destroyer. But at this kind of range, he's probably only going to get one salvo off. And these torpedoes are never going to miss. There he is. He's seen him. He's firing. His secondaries open up. That's the only shot he's going to get away. Levati has got to get these torpedoes off. And, well, yeah, there's no real surprise here, is there? Yeah, that was pretty inevitable. So, a victory for Levati, who plays on the EU server in the Fubuki Tier 8 Japanese destroyer. Almost 500,000 credits earned, 3,433 base experience, and the amount of damage done, mostly torpedo damage obviously, 205,000 damage. Levati wins 2,500 doubloons for his efforts. Hang on a minute, Jingles, why 2,500? Why not 3,000 like you gave the guy in the North American server? Well, you can't buy 3,000 doubloons on the EU gift shop, I'm afraid. 2,500 is the only option, so sorry about that, but address your problems to Wargaming, not me. And that does seem like a pretty good place to stop for today. I do realise I said at the beginning of the video that we were going to show you the winner in the destroyer category today. What can I say? I'm crap. I never get anything right. I've just had too much fun showing you the runners-up in the destroyer category. But the very next World of Warships video that you see, I promise, we're going to be giving somebody a Diana class premium cruiser. I keep saying that, don't I? It's not a Diana class at all. It's a Paladin class cruiser that just happens to be called the Diana. But anyway, somebody's going to be winning a ship in the next World of Warships video. In the meantime, as always, folks, take care, have fun playing whatever you're playing, and I will catch you next time.